then we'll just start it off, okay?
Yeah.
Welcome, everybody, and we're glad you're here for another Drought Task Force kind of webinar town hall meeting. So we wanted to update everyone on what's going on, and certainly a lot has been going on except for rain. So anyway, I'll have Glenn's Supervisor McGordy speak, and we'll make it a productive day for everyone.
Sure. So, really, so there's so much going on in terms of water in the county. So the main thing I think of significance was the fact that curtailments were put into effect last week by the Water Resources Control Board, which means basically those of us with water rights no longer can irrigate. So now it's kind of a race for our vineyards between ripening and raisioning. So that will impact Mendocino's economy as well as other crops and livestock. So it's not a good development, but it was also kind of anticipated. So fortunately, some of the vineyards and farmers have water through the Russian River Flood Control District contracts. So they will probably have enough water to get done for the year. So the other other new developments, I'm going to more or less turn to Josh as we try to solve this and sort of untangle how do we get water from places where there is water to places where there's not. And that takes some doing, and Josh is going to explain to you some of our trials and tribulations. And then we'll have an opportunity for some other comments on things happening water-wise around the county. So thank all of you for joining us today as we try to keep you updated on what's happening.
Sure. Okay. Supervisors Josh Metz, and I'm on contract with the county, as you know, to be a key coordination for drought response and looking at strategic planning towards re-establishing the county water agency. So I was going to provide updates from around the county that I've sort of recruited from my conversations with different folks, and I'll do that. But I would also, before doing that, just like to acknowledge the large team within the county that is, pretty much on a daily basis working to resolve these challenges, and they're complex. They're not simple. They're of course having to do with where the water is and where it needs to get, and where there may or may not be infrastructure well in place to move it. But it's also dealing with economies and complex legal issues, and I think a real sense of urgency out there. There is a team, and I do acknowledge their hard work along with me during the week. So I'm sure you guys are aware of that, but maybe some folks out there listening would appreciate knowing that we're paying attention. It's just things don't move as fast as some folks might like. You started off, Supervisor, with the little summary of the status of the Russian River, and I think you covered it well regarding the curtailments and so on. The real sense of urgency remains on the coast in the town of Mendocino, where there's continually growing count of dry wells. Also, reports of businesses curtailing their hours to accommodate limited supplies of water. Issues with increasing amounts of reported water theft, although I don't have any firsthand information on that front. While the county has taken action to get porta potties installed out there, there are issues that remain. Just kind of, there's a growing need. People got to have somewhere to go. So Ryan Rhodes out on the coast is, doing everything he can to meet the needs of the community, and we're trying to support him as we can. The good news that I reported last time, or maybe at the Board of Supervisors meeting, was that the Mendocino Unified School District had stepped up and, in coordination with us and the state water boards, have made available water that flows from their wells at this school in Mendocino. And they're currently supplying 8 truckloads a week of water from that well. They've increased that by about 2 truckloads. So while not replacing the 7 to 10 truckloads a day that we're rolling out of Fort Bragg prior to the curtailment of that supply, it is something. So, that's much appreciated. There's also work ongoing to install a pump at the Albion School. Ryan Rhodes has sourced a pump, which they didn't have a pump for filling. So they will likely be able to begin filling from the Albion School in a matter of days. They do have questions, regarding a few actions that we're focused on. One is under the state's urgent drinking water needs program. There is a supply truckloads, i.e. 17 to 20 pallet truckloads of drinking water that are somewhere and allegedly coming here. And so we're working with the state on transporting that water out here. There has been an order placed for the town of Mendocino. It would be received by the community services district there and then distributed. The county's also working on getting a supply delivered to Ukiah that would then be made available to communities in the outlying areas. And I would say those are days and weeks out in terms of being available for the community. There is a renewed effort, I think, led in large part by our city partners, the city of Ukiah and the city of Fort Bragg, along with actually the city of Willits eventually, and most likely Point Arena, to the creation of a mutual aid agreement under the Drought Emergency Declaration that would allow for the temporary delivery of water, first from Ukiah to Fort Bragg. Our initial action is focused on using tanker trucks to get the water from Ukiah to Willits. So that is the status of that effort is mutual aid agreements are in draft. And once those are in place and we can source the trucking haulers, we should be able to get that rolling. Our goal is to have that before the end of the month, if not sooner. And so the initial target is something like 10 6,000 gallon truckloads per day, about 60 to 70,000 gallons of water that would be input into the city of Fort Bragg's reservoir at Summers Lane, which would then be processed through the city's treatment plant and made available to local water haulers. There will be a small increase in the price of the water. I think it would go from about 3 cents to 6 cents under our current thinking. That could change by the time it gets implemented. And for domestic users, that price would be simply that plus the cost of the hauling. We are also working to address the needs of course, our community of commercial partners out there, critical needs in keeping the businesses alive. So stay tuned for the details of that to be forthcoming, but we're daily working on making that happen. I think a little bit farther out in timing. Again, we're also given some funding opportunities that have recently come out, including the Department of Water Resources just yesterday issued some new guidelines for drought funding that actually include funding for transporting water by rail. So I think that was put in there specifically for the idea that was uh, early on our radar about a month ago. And so we're going to be looking closely at that. One of the big complications with the idea of using the skunk train to haul water was how it would be paid for. So if those Department of Water resource funds are indeed usable under that such a program, that would be a major breakthrough. We're also, the issues of sourcing that water remain, but we've had some initial discussions again, trying to get a sense of the viability of that from the Willits end. And while inconclusive at the moment, the indications are that there's a willing ear there. And so City Manager Brian Bender and his team are in coordination with us as to how we might proceed. Again, they would be looking for a formal ask from the county to make that to kind of advance that through the council. They're also working on restoring some capability in their groundwater system. So I would say that that's any program with that would be a month plus out, but that could be a significant benefit because it could reduce the cost, safety implications of trucks on the highway, and of course the climate impacts from exhaust and all that stuff. So those are kind of the latest on efforts we have on trying to get water to the coast. I've also been in touch with folks in Anderson Valley. The good news from the Anderson Valley side is in working with the Department of Building Department in the county, they worked out a longstanding need they had for a growth model that would help the state increase funding for their wastewater and water system project, which has been funded by a grant program. So they're renewing activity on that, and that's good news. I've got increasingly detailed contacts in the various parts of the county, and so I'll be able to bring back even kind of finer grain detailed reports at later meetings. I was also in touch with folks in Covelo earlier, and their small team, local water district has, is continuing to kind of hear about well drying situations. No discrete numbers are available in terms of what that looks like. There are, of course, these concerns around water hauling in trucks for cannabis operations that have been mentioned before. So that's kind of the status of water in parts of the county. I've left out, of course, the status of the tribal lands. We are organizing something I mentioned before, these kind of regional water manager and county coordinated staff meetings, which we hope to begin next Thursday with a group on the coast and then a group on the interior, where we would invite our tribal partners to join those calls. So those are all things we're working on. The folks at the RCD, Deborah Edelman has stepped in while Joe Scriven has kind of moved up and taken charge of more of the operations there. Deborah is a great asset and is working with us on improving our outgoing communications. We're going to ideally be launching this new newsletter that will begin, I hope, next week. And of course, Beth at the RCD is a key part of the communications team, as well as Michael and Amber at the Department of Transportation. So things are happening. I know it's probably frustrating for many out there to not have more discrete and obvious results, but I can tell you that daily we are working to try to avert this slow-moving disaster. And I think with that, let's see, that would be my regional water status report. I touched on a few of other items that are on the agenda in giving that, but maybe I would offer up an opportunity for any questions from either of you that you might want more information about before moving on to the next.
Yeah, I'll just, Josh, certainly we're hearing about concerns of dry wells, and, the situation in Redwood Valley is coming to, being brought up more and more. So what do you have to update us on that situation there?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I had outreach from Bree Clotter. Bree is on the Redwood Valley Water District Board, and she was asking about potential support for an effort to annex the Redwood Valley Water District by into the Russian River Flood Control District. And from my understanding, the Flood Control District has taken an action on this in support of this idea at their last meeting. I believe perhaps both Bree and Beth Salamone are on this webinar. So if you would like to hear firsthand from either of them, I think we could probably invite them in as panelists. My understanding from Bree is that there's a meeting next Thursday for the Redwood Valley Water District where they are planning to take up this issue. One key point that did come up in the conversation regarding funding was reference to a 2018 communication from California LAFCO to Mendocino LAFCO about, I think it was about $100,000 fund that was expressly for the purpose of supporting the annexation process. So looks like Bree and both Beth are on the line here. So maybe if it's all right with you, we could invite them to add into what it said.
Sure, it's fine with me. So I don't know who would like to speak first. Bree, Beth, either one of you is fine.
Beth is lit up there, it looks like.
Yeah, Beth, you're ready to go.
I am. Thank you very much. So there's not a whole lot to update at this point. The two districts are meeting in an ad hoc format. This is a series of conversations and discussions and attempts that has lasted many years. So we are asking that the ad hoc committee asked that both boards reaffirm their interest and commitment to move forward at looking at the potential for annexation.
Okay.
As Josh mentioned, the Flood Control District did that this month, and they have the Redwood Valley meeting is later this month, and we expect them to do the same. And we will continue the discussions.
Bree, do you have anything to add?
I guess a couple things. When Beth and I first started talking about this, there were a couple of us up here in Redwood Valley, Katrina Fry, who's on the Redwood Valley MAC, and me, who I'm a member of the Water District. We both thought that getting annexed into the Flood Control District would go a long way towards providing some water security for the agricultural folks here in the valley. There are other ideas about funding other things, but this would provide the ag users with some security. And so we were talking about it, and the question, of course, is it's not going to come free. There's going to be costs associated with doing that. And we're trying to figure out where we can get those funds. Redwood Valley, the water district is extremely constrained in terms of its budget right now. We just suffered a 30% increase in our water rates. And that's just so that we can rebuild our reserves. So anyhow, what we're looking for is funding to help us with the annexation project. As Josh mentioned, I had heard from Granville Poole, who's a retired member of our board, that at a meeting back in 2018, the subject of funding coming from the California LAFCO came up. And that was the first I'd heard. But if that's true, that would be really nice to have at least that initial pot of money to help with the funding. The other thing, we had originally hoped that we might get funding out of the PG&E settlement, but that doesn't look like that's going to happen, and I understand that. So then the question is, where's the funding going to come from? I'm hoping that with all the focus, both regional, state, and federal on water issues, that there would be some pots of money that we could apply for grants for. And I'm hoping that there might be somebody in the county who could help us with that funding process, because none of us have, any knowledge about writing grants. And that's a challenge. So anyhow, and then the bottom line is, does the county support us in moving forward with annexation? Because if the county's not supportive of this, I don't, it's going to be really hard to sell this to LAFCO. Thanks.
So I can only speak for myself. I'm highly supportive of it, and anything we can do for water security is, I think, critical. And I think we can probably get the Board of Supervisors behind it. This is the sort of function that we hope for our water agency, is to help find funds to do things like this. And I'm hoping that in the course of the monies they're going to be made available for drought relief, that this might be something that could be funded with some of those dollars. So I don't know, Josh, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd say, first of all, in terms of kind of regional water resiliency, interconnecting disconnected water districts is a key strategy. So I think if it can be navigated politically and economically, then I think it would be a smart move for the county to and the water for the flood control district and the Redwood Valley district to become one. That would be great. I know there's a long history there. And the county does have on contract a very skilled grant writing team led by Jordan Blau of Laco Associates. He's really quite responsive, very engaged, very knowledgeable. And I think that, again, one of the things we've been doing since I've come on board is gathering a growing list of needs, and so I think this would be one that we would put on that list. And we are, I'm now that I've clicked over to the attendees on the Zoom, I'm seeing a bunch of familiar names. I almost want to invite everybody to give their own report. But I'm seeing Jeff Smith from the Department of Water Resources. He's our main contact there, who is, that's one of the topics on the agenda here. The Department of Water Resources is managing the state's sort of drought emergency funding actions now. And so we've sent them a list. I think it's over 40 different projects from around the county. And Jeff and his team are currently evaluating those projects and will be getting back to us early next week, I believe, with any response and looking for additional information. So we can add the annexation of Redwood Valley Water District and the Flood Control District onto our project list and explore what funding options there might be. And I know Jordan's taking good notes right now, so we'll be talking about that at our next meeting, with Jordan's part of our sort of drought emergency response group that's set up through the county's emergency operations center, which I see is also an agenda item. And I know I'm looking at this list here. In doing my water status reports, I believe I skipped over one important city called Fort Bragg. And if you supervisors are willing, I see that their talented public works director, John Smith, is on the in the attendees and is prepared to give a brief status report about what's happening in Fort Bragg. Is that okay with you both?
Oh, yeah, it
Yeah.
sounds good.
Yes.
Can we bring John Smith into the webinar, please?
Just before we leave the subject of kind of overlap of water services, it's still my intention to form some kind of an exploratory committee to look at having the ability to move water from Talmadge to Redwood Valley through some sort of a common connection. I think that long-term sustainability, having the opportunity to be able to wholesale water from the city of Ukiah or move water back and forth depending on the occasion is something that would give us a lot of flexibility. And I remember when our governor was here, he said it made sense to declare the first drought emergency in Mendocino because unlike other parts of the state, there's no kind of connectivity with anybody else, so that when we start to run out of water, there's no way to move water. And so anything we can do to create resilience, I think is smart. And I know that the city of Ukiah is interested. I've talked with Phil Smith and Sean White about this, and I know Redwood Valley is interested. This doesn't preclude any changes in business for anybody who's delivering water now. It's just the ability to be connected so that there's a possibility of buying water if for some reason you're not able to deliver it through your existing infrastructure in the Ukiah Valley and the Russian River Valley region.
Yeah, Supervisor, if I might just add a little to that, John, I see you're there. Quickly, there has been this continual question from local businesses, water hauling businesses, about desiring to haul water from Ukiah to the coast without just being straight up paid by their customer. And apparently they're running into basically regulatory constraints on their ability to do that. So I think maybe just to address the question, why is it not feasible for folks for that to happen at this point? So my understanding about that is basically it has to do with the source of origin, and the ability to transfer water between watersheds is highly regulated and limited, and thus it's not really a viable option. The best option that we see is through this mutual aid agreement framework that is being put together.
It may be interesting to explore whether that could be dropped in the case of an emergency, because there's going to be places where it's not going to be convenient to send a water truck to pick up water in Fort Bragg if the need is, in the town of Elk. So these are some of the things that we have to explore. Of course, they may also be able to get water from Point Arena, but we want to try to create as much resiliency as we can for water deliveries, because and Anderson Valley may also be water insecure in some cases where water trucking would be useful. So that's something that's on our to-do list.
I see we have John ready to do his thing.
Hi, John. Welcome.
Hey, thank you very much for inviting me once again. Of course, I'm always, City of Fort Bragg is always willing to help. I think that's the case in a lot of emergencies for a lot of agencies also. We like helping each other out, whether it's options or in this case, water. So whatever we need to do to help, let us know. We'll work through it. So for us, our water condition is currently stable at the moment. That changes frequently, though, with the high tides that come in. We're expecting 15 tides over 6 feet in September. So we're gearing up for that and trying to prepare as best we can for some potential contamination of that of our Noyo water source. Our other two small sources are extremely steady. They've been stable for several weeks now. They produce about half of our water for the city currently. So we're happy to see there's not a decline in those two. Really, it's just that the Noyo source that's and that contamination of the salt with saltwater intrusion. At times, oftentimes we can absorb one high tide, but it's the second and third that we definitely adds a whole lot more salt to our system. So we're working through that and it seems to be okay. We have not used our reservoir. We have one reservoir, if you recall, 45 acre feet. That is just the last source that we use, and we keep that for emergencies only. But we may need to start using it in September here with these tides coming. The schedule on the desalination plant, if you recall, we have a 200 gallon per minute system, RO system that's headed our way, hopefully. TTA is the 3rd week of September. Our operators are working very hard to prepare to receive that unit and get it plugged in. Power's being run now, drain lines, and so on and so forth. So we're trying to be proactive on that and get it hooked up and plugged in as quickly as possible, so we can absorb some of those high tides that come in. Shallow groundwater, we're still working on that. Working on design for that. We've got a decent shallow groundwater well that might be productive, at least around 50 gallons a minute. It's pretty small, but every little bit helps. So we're still in pursuit of that, working on design and working through treatment options, working with the Department of Drinking Water on requirements that they're expecting, and working with them closely. Conservation for the city of Fort Bragg, really, a lot of this is owed to the customers in town. They have done their job, and that's allowed us to stay above water. Pun intended, I guess.
In water.
Stay in water. There you go. But it's gonna require more in the next month or two. If we don't get rain in October, it's going to get very challenging. And if we are hate to put too much weight on that RO system, but we're counting on that to really bridge those gaps when those high tides come in. So with that, that kind of gets you up to speed. We're doing okay.
So I have a question for you, John, on the reverse osmosis system, because obviously it could represent a long-term solution for some of the coastal communities. Mm-hmm. And your case, you're not taking direct seawater. This is brackish water, correct?
Correct.
And about how many gallons per hour does it produce?
It's 200 gallons a minute is what it's sized for. So it's pretty small.
So that's a nice amount of water to have into the system. And did you tell me also that the effluent would basically go into your sewage treatment plant for?
That's correct. Our brine will discharge into our collection system and provide a great deal of dilution because our water plant, or where the RO system will be placed, will be at the top of the line. So we'll get quite a bit of dilution, and we're careful not to disrupt our wastewater facility, treatment facility, but we do have an existing discharge to the ocean. So it's very helpful, and the State Water Board was extremely helpful through that process. So.
And do you also have to be careful with the brine not disrupting sort of biological activity inside of the sewage treatment plant, or?
Yes, yeah. So we did those calculations. We know how many hours and what concentration we need to keep it below.
So, John, this is John Haschek, and with the desalination, will be the cost per gallon for that?
We didn't calculate that. You know, it's a temporary skid mounted unit. We didn't do the calculations. We knew we needed the water. So we're, I hate to say cost is not an issue, you know, not a concern. But we will use it as little as possible. I can tell you that, only as needed, because of those electrical costs.
Yeah, because certainly there's a lot of people emailing me saying that desalination is the solution and using that brackish water would be the way to solve the problem. So I'm just trying to see what if it's
Yeah.
practical or not in the coast situation.
Sure. Yeah. In this case, you know, we really have a maximum of 2,500 milligrams for the saline water. Ocean water is about 32,000. So it's pretty low, pretty small amount. And that helps us out with the brine discharge because I mean, it's concentrated, but it's just not going to have much of an impact on our sewer system. So.
Okay.
If I might just kind of add on to the theme that we rounded out our last discussion with, which is sort of a strategic view. You know, if I was putting, you know, the 10, 20, 30 plus year kind of view on the thinking, I would be an advocate for keeping desalination kind of a regional solution for the coast in that mix. Certainly there are, you know, it would be smart to look at all possible other sources, be they groundwater, recycled water, or surface waters, but given the constraints and the goals on biodiversity and things like that, desal does work around the world. And, you know, there could be a vision created, and it potentially could, you know, really be a kind of model place for kind of local resiliency and sustainability, wherein, you know, desal plays an important mix, linking that with, you know, sustainable power generation solutions and other capital infrastructure. So I think these are the kind of big visions that the county and the water agency, and working with its municipal partners, would, you know, if we want to avoid this situation for the generations to come, we'd be smart to take those kind of big views now. Begin taking them. And I know John and I have been sharing some conversation around that, as well as with the supervisors. So thanks, John.
Of course, yes.
And I've just kind of, it's nice being able to see who's on this, who's listening in here. Yes, I'm wondering about, I see Brian Bender from Willits. Brian, would you like to give any kind of update on the status in Willits other than what I've provided already? I guess you could raise your hand if yes, or we can let you in if looks like you're in, Brian. You're on the spot. Sorry for putting you on the spot, but I think you're doing a great job leading the city, and maybe like to add any comments to what I said earlier about the city.
Thanks, Josh. No, we just, you know, like I said, we were considering the proposal a couple weeks back. We were doing our own internal assessment, and we realized we had some issues with our ground production facility. It's offline right now. We have to make some repairs. We're looking at it about a month to get that up and running, and then we could, you know, seriously entertain the request that I think the county wants to put forward to us. We still need to present this to the council formally. We were looking to do it at a previous council meeting, but then, you know, the option was to go elsewhere, look at Ukiah. So if the city is going to be included in that process, we just need some time to get materials out to the council and have the council consider how all the ramifications of the request.
Great.
And I also, we would like to definitely be party to the mutual aid agreement. I think that's beneficial. There's 4 municipalities within the county, and we would like to be have a seat at that table as well.
So Brian, that's good news. I'm glad to hear that. I'm wondering too, and perhaps Supervisor Hasjack can talk about this as well, is what's going on sort of to the periphery of city limits, and are you being requested to be a water source for domestic water use for wells that are drying?
No, we're not. I mean, the proposal to supply water to coastal communities is really the first one and the only one that we are addressing regarding processed water. Our non-potable water resource is essentially exceeding, I wouldn't say exceeding capacity, but it is a resource that people are utilizing, and you know, the haulers can access it 24/7, and that activity is going on 24/7, and that is going for rural property owners, livestock operations, agriculture activities, and people just want to, who need water at their properties for any number of reasons. And we are providing that resource. Council has some concerns that they are receiving from the general public, but we are doing our due diligence. We're doing some monitoring wells installed, and the initial results from the first well shows that we are not significantly altering the aquifer that we're accessing with that well. So we're ramping up for some dialogue sessions with the council and the general and with the public on this matter, and we encourage anyone from the county to participate in those sessions as well.
Okay, thank you. John, do you have any comments on what the water situation is in the 3rd district? Since some of us really don't have a lot of contact up there and have concerns.
Well, certainly like what Brian just said about the Willits situation is that, you know, the people in the valley are concerned about, you know, potentially the wells going dry. And I've heard about a couple. And then up in Covelo, there's a big concern about the, you know, amount of water that is being taken out of the valley floor and up into the hills, you know, for cannabis production, mostly. And so people are very concerned about that. And I think that Laytonville has a pretty good grasp of what their capacity is, and they sound like they're doing, you know, reasonable monitoring of their capacity. So I think that you know, the Covelo situation is probably the most worrisome.
I just want to add, kind of close out this discussion, is that the city of Willis right now, for our public drinking supply, our reservoirs are running at 69% capacity. So we are looking good. We have implemented phase 1 restrictions just to be on the safe side. But it looks like the general public is responding to our request to limit usage. Our numbers for the month of July were down compared to a year ago. So, you know, I think the message is being heard. And once again, we want to be a partner in this, but there's some concerns that we're going to have to deal with and provide that information to the council.
That's great. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Let's see. We do have an agenda, which is still within the agenda are these kind of regional reports. And if we have time, I'm seeing a couple other folks that I might call in, but I'll look to you before I would do that.
Yeah, and I see that Tamara Alanis is on the line, and
Right.
she's the executive director up in Brook Trails.
Right. Yeah, maybe we'll bring in Tamara. That's great. Anthony, are you seeing Tamara Alanis?
I am. I'm pulling her up right now.
Oh, thank you. And just so you might get ready, I see Paul Anderson, the city manager of Point Arena, is here. So maybe he would be willing. If you're willing, Paul, raise your hand.
Hey, Josh.
Hi, Tamara. Nice to see you. Thanks for
Hey.
jumping in.
Yeah, no problem. Hi, Supervisor Haschek, Supervisor McGordy. Right now, the situation in Brook Trails is that we're right at about 75% of capacity. We are watching what's going on around us. Obviously, we've had questions from the board about some of the proposed water sharing agreements. And of course, we have a board member, Director Orth, who is the chair of LAFCO. So we've been hearing about some of the out of area service agreements that have been talked about. So, we're just following what's going on. We're following what's going on down the hill in Willits. We work very closely with the city staff, both wastewater and water staff. So, of course, as Supervisor Haschek knows and Beth knows, and I want you to know, Josh, if there's anything that I can help you with, Jordan or anything else, I'm happy to do so. I definitely am watching what's going on in Redwood Valley. I did just, I thought that the Redwood Valley County Water District had gotten hydrant locks with the PG&E settlement money, but I thought that would be, that would be an interesting thing for people to hear, because we are hearing about increased water theft, and there's a lot of information in the media about it too, about that going on in other areas. We have had a little bit of that in Brook Trails, not too much. We mostly have wharf heads in some areas where the pressure is pretty high. So, and we have pretty diligent neighbors who are willing to call and report if they see somebody taking water. So, so far so good. We're looking at, we've received a technical assistance grant and are working with the Cal Rural Water Association to do a potable reuse study to see if it's a feasible alternative source for water in Brook Trails. And just as a last point, I think it seems like a no-brainer to keep that little desal plant out there in Fort Bragg for as long as possible. And as a resident of the city of Willits, I was watching the talk about the transfer of water out to the coast. So of course, if there's anything that you can do to be more reliant and self-sufficient on your own supply, that's definitely the best case to go. And it's always the most cost-effective. I couldn't agree with the public works director from Fort Bragg more than that. This isn't a cost benefit analysis, right? This is a matter of safety and security and health and sanitation. So I'm at the disposal of this Drought Task Force, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you about what's going on in Brook Trails with our water supply.
Thank you, Tamara. Tamara, and we really appreciate your support. And you're right, we did include in the PG&E funding box for some of the hydrants in Redwood Valley. It is a concern.
Great.
There's some pretty inconsiderate people out there. And as the old saying goes, you want to keep the honest folks honest, and there's nothing like a lock to do that.
Great. Thank you, Tamara. And I see we have also had Paul Anderson join us, city manager from Point Arena. So Paul, nice to see you here. Thanks for jumping in.
Sure.
We haven't had a chance yet to talk directly, but if you wouldn't mind giving us an update on the status of things in your area, that would be great.
Well, I can speak for Point Arena specifically and the geographic area just around it.
Great.
My understanding is our water supply is good. We get most of our water out of the Garcia groundwater, and it is flowing well. I will say, our water is provided by a private water company, Point Arena Water Works. And I invited Bill Hay. I don't know if he's on the list of names there. If he is, he would be the best person to ask about water supply in the area. But that's all I really have to report. I do know the situation in Walla Walla is a little different, but I can't really give you any specifics. Supervisor Williams, if he's on the line, might be able to do that. So thank you, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul, for checking in.
So there's let's see, there's Sage from the city of Ukiah, if we want to get any kind of report from Ukiah. And then I'm seeing we do have some attendees raise John Almeida raising his hand. I don't know if he's a water manager or a general public, but
Yeah, John Almeida is a resident of the Little Lake Valley in Willits.
okay. They will save that for the public comment period.
Go ahead, Sage, if you're all connected and ready to go.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for having me this afternoon. One of the things, big thanks to the group and to all the regional partners that are on this call today. I think it really demonstrates the great deal of work that's going on behind the scenes to really work to hold our own in Mendocino County through this extraordinary drought that we're in right now. The city of Ukiah, as most know, we've invested quite a bit in our infrastructure over the years and have really good resources. We are continually monitoring those resources and want to make sure those resources are used prudently, not only for the residents of Ukiah, but also for the county altogether. We even before the curtailments that have currently hit, the city was reducing our pull from the Russian River by 75–80%, which was probably more than just about any other entity along the Russian River corridor. And that was just in recognition that we need to do our part through this area to help our neighbors. And we're going to continue to do that, continue to look forward to working with our regional partners to see how we can continue to help, including in the mutual aid agreement that has been discussed this afternoon. And really thinking about that mutual aid agreement beyond just this, what's needed this week, but what's going to be needed next week and next month and perhaps next year, hopefully not. But certainly, droughts will come and go, and we need to be prepared to be able to deal with these in the future as well. And think that mutual aid agreement is a foundational piece to the water resiliency and security that the supervisors have stressed this afternoon on this call. I will say our recycled water system is producing really well. I mean, so far that has produced and alleviated an additional 180 million gallons of demand on Lake Mendocino, and has helped ensure that agricultural production in the Ukiah Valley, which is absolutely critical to the economics of our county, are able to help make it through these periods of drought. So, we'll just continue working and plugging away and working towards solutions to these myriad of issues that we're currently dealing with right now.
Thank you, Sage.
Thank you, Sage.
Okay. Let's see. I think we've covered. Let's see. I do see one last person that I would maybe Jessica Stoll Otto from Covelo, because she and I have been corresponding, and she's part of the water district there. And if Jessica, if you're willing to say a few things about your perspective on things in Round Valley.
Hi, yeah, I'm happy to do that. I'm going to leave my video off because my daughter is also Skyping with her grandma. Well, we kind of have a unique situation because I'm listening to all these different water districts and your complex systems, and we don't have any systems. So we're in a more vulnerable place where each individual household has their own well, and that's it. And so we really need to do some vulnerability assessment. That's a project I'm trying to undertake as a volunteer. because we just have, a part-time water district manager here in our tiny little water district. And so I could really use some assistance and access to some data with the county to get a sense of how deep people's wells are up here, and do some outreach to get a sense of how people's wells are doing. We want to put together an effort to increase the amount of test wells we have. Right now, we only have a handful of test wells here that the district tests. And so we need to work on expanding that. And and it'd be really great to look long-term, future thinking. How do we develop any kind of water storage capacity to, in the future, provide backup water? Because, we have water until we don't. And how do we serve those families? How do we even know which families are out there whose wells are going dry? So we need to set up we need to do a vulnerability assessment is what I'm seeing. And we need to figure out some sort of strategy to make sure vulnerable families have what they need, be it assistance in drilling deeper wells, if that's the need, or providing backup water or something like that. Another issue that we face with some of our water resources in those wells is some areas of the valley have high levels of arsenic. And my understanding also is that deeper down, there may be higher levels of arsenic as well. So as people's wells are going down, they may experience increasing levels of arsenic than they're normally used to. So we need to do some assessment on all of that. And like I said, I'm kind of spearheading this as a volunteer because this matters. And I really care about our community. And it really concerns me when I see on our community social media pages that people are experiencing impacts to their wells, and there's no mechanism to monitor that or step in and help people. So as much assistance as the county can give us in that, access to information, things like that would be wonderful.
Thank you, Jessica.
Yeah, that's very helpful. I appreciate you stepping in here, and everybody. I know it's a little bit like Socratic method in school, being called out to jump in, but really, I think it really helps us, me and the supervisors, get a much better sense of what's happening regionally, and I think it leads well into the next agenda items that we have. Really, a little bit of a update on the county's emergency operations center. So this was activated a couple weeks back under the county emergency declaration and the state's emergency declaration, and it is really intended to be a coordination entity for all of the county's activities in response to the disaster. So really, we've been getting ourselves organized. One of the things that I've learned about this structure is that it's well suited for fast-moving disasters such as fires or earthquakes, which kind of are discrete and distinct time periods, and then there's a recovery period. This is somewhat of a slow-moving disaster, and so we're really navigating the unique characteristics of this disaster and how we organize ourselves. But really, we're focused on sourcing water, so the urgent drinking water needs, the bottled water deliveries are being worked through this program, as well as the consideration of mutual aid delivered water between Ukiah and Fort Bragg. So those are things that we're working on. And in regards to what I think this meeting reflects is a really engaged set of individuals around the county. We have previously talked about regional, kind of sub-regional groups getting together on a more regular basis to kind of have a week by week, or at least a bi-weekly conversation like this. And so we will be organizing these through the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center. I hope even tomorrow that we'll be sending out these invitations. The idea is that we're going to kind of divide ourselves into two groups, which we're calling the coast and the interior. So mainly some of the dynamics of each sort of bioregion are unique challenges. So the idea would be that beginning August 19th, we would hold two sequential meetings for folks from the coast beginning at 8 a.m. and interior beginning at 9:30 for about an hour. Water managers and delegates from the city and water districts to share information, needs, and explore options for resolving the situation. So please expect to see some email coming from the county shortly on that, and make time in your calendars beginning August 19th. And then I believe the idea is to do it every other week through the end of the year, unless it really rains good and we can take a break earlier before Christmas. But anyhow, that's the thinking on the EOC, and we'll continue to give updates at these ad hoc committee meetings. Other topics on the agenda was funding. I mentioned the Department of Water Resources is currently reviewing the county project list. I've heard of a couple new ones that we would probably add to that list, having to do with the annexation process for the Redwood Valley and this vulnerability assessment in Covelo. And whether those would qualify under the current programs is not yet clear, but I think they're good projects that we should add. Oh, and I'm seeing Jeff Smith from the Department of Water Resources is raising his hand. So that means we can get a direct report from the man in the department. If we can just let Jeff Smith in and hear what he has to say. Thanks for stepping up, Jeff. Looks like you're on mute still. There you go. Great.
All right, guys. I didn't know if you wanted to circle back, but since you brought it up again, I wanted to touch base with you, and you covered it pretty good. Josh did a great job of getting in a comprehensive list of a lot of drought projects for Mendocino County. We've been talking about it for a couple of weeks, and that list I think included many projects. And the first round of funding that's been made available, or I should say guidelines have been developed, which specifies what it'll be used for, finally came out this week. And that this money is specifically targeting, and I think Josh mentioned this, small communities and drought funding, or projects that focus on relieving drought in small communities, which is basically under 3,000 connections or service 3,000 acre feet, and they're not served by an urban water supplier. So that's this first bunch of money. And I agree with Josh, I've heard several things come up here, which in the back of my head, I'm thinking, well, that might be a possibility, So, we can get those, send those in also to Steve or myself, and we can get those on the list.
Yeah, so just a note on that, Jeff, for folks listening, we are curating the list through the county. So if you have a need in your community for a project, send it to me, and I'll feed it to our team. We'll add it to the list and pass it on to Jeff.
Yes, please. Thank you, Josh. I was going to say that would be excellent if everyone who has something they think would qualify or needs to discuss it should go through Josh. He's already established, a good list already. There will be more funding coming for larger projects, or other than small, for urban water suppliers. That is not yet available. I believe it's $200 million for multi-benefit drought relief funding. The guidelines on that is still being worked out. But I believe what's going to happen, I think Josh had a mix of projects on his list, and what will happen since he's already submitted it for Mendocino County and you guys, what doesn't fit under the small community qualifications will be pushed on or held on to for when the guidelines come out for the other funding. So I myself, knowing how the system works, I'm very happy that Josh and Mendocino could get this list going and in at this point as this funding starts to become available. The only other thing I was going to say, I think I already covered this. Some of the things for the small communities, like I said, and it's listed in the the guidelines: hauled water, temporary water tanks, bottled water, water vending machines, emergency water interties, new wells or rehab of existing, and there's some construction there too, possibly. So, like I said, and we've heard a lot of that come up right here. So, yeah.
Can I ask a question, Jeff? Just like we have heard, particularly from Covelo, sort of there's a capacity limitation there. And I'm wondering if any of these funds could be used to help subsidize a capacity increase in terms of, staff capacity in Covelo, for example, to help implement some of the things that Jessica mentioned, all the outreach and sort of the vulnerability assessment idea in particular.
That's something we definitely look into it. Off the top of my head, I can't say for sure, but again, let's write them down and then so we can start looking into all the details.
Okay. Yeah, that's the best way for folks listening. The best way to get a formal consideration by the state is to describe the project in some concise form, and that's really knowing who the key advocates are, who the key contacts are, and all of that, and that's what we would feed up to the state for their initial review.
And I don't, Josh is the project list. I'm going to call you the coordinator. I hope that's okay,
yes,
Josh.
That's fine.
But I want to add too, as much information as you can. I know maybe some communities might not have the technical. I don't know if I'd worry too much about that. State your problem or what the issue is, what would help as a resolve, and any detail you can give. But I want to say too, it doesn't have to be overly technical, we at this point, and because there will be follow-up. If it's flagged as a possibility for funding, we definitely will follow up with Josh or reach out to whoever, Josh can be the go-between and we'll get more information. So all I want to say is don't let maybe technical details hinder you from, voicing your problem or anything like that. So
that's great. Supervisors, do you have any comments, Glenn?
Just a comment as just sort of a general policy. Remember, everything we're talking about today, if it involves Mendocino County, will have to go through the Board of Supervisors to make any final decisions. So we're talking in generalities here, but when it gets down to specifics like mutual aid agreements and such, that's a step. And I just want to be sure everyone understands that we can't decide things on Zoom meetings. It's a little more involved than that. But nonetheless, we still need to hear from people because all of these things start with a good idea, and the good ideas start from occasions like this, and they kind of work their way through the system. They go to Josh, who works maybe with someone to develop a proposal, which in turn goes on to Jeff's shop, and the supervisors ultimately submitting it along the way, and then the county receives the money, and the supervisors okay it to be dispersed. So there's a whole kind of chain of custody that goes along with the funding. And I just want everyone to understand why things go so slowly is because we have a lot of legal requirements in this. When it involves water, the state of California is pretty particular, and when it involves money, both the state and the county are pretty particular. So that's, if you're wondering why haven't you guys got water over to Fort Bragg and Mendocino yet, that's part of the reason why. I just want to be sure everyone understands that.
And I'd just like to say, I appreciate Jeff Smith being on the line, and I think you heard a couple of really good proposals right here, so they keep coming up, the one about annexing Redwood Valley and also this Covelo feasibility study, and vulnerability. And I think those are two worthy communities, because we're really stressed for water, and the resources for Mendocino County on our own are very, very limited. So thank you for being here, Jeff, and appreciate it.
Yes, Jeff, we appreciate your time.
Anytime. I'm always here lurking, so you guys look for me and reach out.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, I've mentioned that was Department of Water Resources. I've mentioned the urban drinking water needs. That's through the state water boards. We're working on that one. That's the bottled water. And then there's a third one, which we've just recently connected with which is USDA Rural Development. And apparently there are federal funds, that's U.S. Department of Agriculture, that we would likely qualify for. So we've already sent some initial outreach to their regional rep down in Santa Rosa, and we look forward to getting feedback from them in a matter of days. So that could be a significant help in getting funds for the hauling effort.
Josh,
yeah.
If I could just jump in too.
Sure.
We've had a series of communications and meetings with Senator Feinstein's office, and they're trying to help us with the USDA and also the Economic Development Agency Administration and FEMA. And so really, I appreciate their outreach to us and this ongoing communication that we have.
Thanks for mentioning that, John. So I think on our agenda, we're now to the other items Q&A, and I see Mr. Almeida has been patiently waiting with his hand raised there. If you're both willing, supervisors, I would suggest that we move to the Q&A. Is that okay with you?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for the meeting. I appreciate the heads up on everything that's happening. As you know, my name's John Almeida. I live in the Willits Valley. A number of us in this valley are worried about our wells. For over a year now, before you guys started the meetings, before the drought became as complex as it is right now, we've been meeting, and John Haschek knows that, about our concerns of the new water program that Willits wants to start drafting from the aquifer that we depend on. And then when we learned about having water shipped to the coast, that even really made things more nervous for us. So my request and concern, and maybe something you could look into, is that lobbying either Dianne Feinstein's office or Huffman or whoever you can, I would say Feinstein would be pretty powerful, to get the military to bring in a portable desalination plant and put it at the mill site in Fort Bragg, so that immediately things could change on the coast without having to tax the inland water aquifers. This is something that's very important. The military uses these plants all over when they go into the Middle East. They got battalions and companies, and they got to provide water. So they got to have something available that we could use here. And in the perfect place is the old mill site in Fort Bragg. And I'd sure like to see somebody start lobbying our government to bring something like that in here so we don't have to tax the inland. When I think about what's happening in Sacramento Valley and San Joaquin Valley, of the overdrafting of those valleys, what it's done to them, it makes me very nervous when I'm in a small valley like Little Lake and my only source of water is my well. So if you could comment to that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thanks, John, for those comments. And certainly we can talk about it with Senator Feinstein the next conversation we have. So I appreciate that idea.
Yeah, and I do as well, because overdraft is really a big issue. We do have the Ukiah Valley Basin Sustainable Groundwater Management Agency, because we want to be sure that we don't overdraft our water supplies and that we have a sustainable draw. It turns out that so far the Ukiah Valley Basin seems to be in pretty good balance. But yeah, we don't want to overdraft anything. And while we would look at taking water in an emergency situation, uh, we 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 don't see that as a long-term sustainable way, obviously, to provide water to communities by trucking it from one place to the other. There's got to be other solutions. And we certainly appreciate neighbors helping neighbors, but not at the expense of hurting everybody. So we're trying to be very careful on this and very conscious of concerns like yours, John, because it's not our intent to do damage.
Yep, and I have, John, just on my end, I've got that noted for forthcoming communications, certainly with Feinstein's office and other partners that we have. So that's noted. Like I mentioned before, some of the conversation that I've already had with John Smith in Fort Bragg has centered around the possibility of utilizing that site for just that purpose. And I think it's I wouldn't expect it to happen overnight, but it's something we can have in our toolkit and on our radar to be working on. So would we want to ask for any further, any other members of the public on the call that might want to?
So we have some questions that are here. There's one from Jenny that says, at some point, could the city of Fort Bragg sell the water currently being discharged to the ocean? Many of us would love access to non-potable water for fire protection, farming, and other non-potable uses. Perhaps grant funding could be looked into for this large amount of water to be accessed. Because of water emergency, perhaps the option could happen. Or at some point, we send it through the water plant to be recycled. So I don't know if John Smith is still here.
No, he had to jump to another meeting. Okay. Yep. That's a complex question or a complex answer to the question. I think, what we can do is, let me copy it here and I'll bring it up in conversation with John and see if we can come back at a later date.
Okay. And then there's a question here from Tamara asks, saying, can we please change this group names to Edge and Myths?
Versus
okay.
Interior and Coast. Okay. Thanks, Tamara. Those are good ideas.
Okay. And then Free Clotter has a question. Is there a maximum ask for small community projects?
I don't know of a maximum number. I think it's all got to be justified by the project cost. Obviously, there's $200 million that they're doling out to the whole state. So, frame your expectations. But I would say if there's legitimate need and it can be justified, that's what the Department of Water Resources will look at first.
Now, does the clerk of the board have an answer to that, or is there someone in the executive office? I saw some kind of answer to that.
To the question about small community projects?
Right.
I do not have that answer, and I don't believe Nadia, who is in the executive office, has that either.
No, okay. I think what you're seeing there is related to the Zoom software, less about the content of the question.
Okay, I thought Darcy Antle was on the line or something. So anyway.
Yeah. And then somebody wants me to give my email. So my email address is jmetz, JMETZ, RGS Robert George Sam .ca.gov. So, yes. So I think that about concludes the content from my end. If you have other questions or comments, supervisors, definitely willing to hear them. I'm not seeing anyone else on the attendees raising their hand.
Well, I'll just add that, you know, we plan on having these regularly, like Josh said, and, you know, our concern is all the areas of our county because we're all experiencing this drought in different ways. And so if anyone has a concern, Supervisor McGordy or I are certainly wanting to hear it. Josh is wanting to hear, you know, we need that open communication. So please communicate with us and we'll try to get answers and we'll try to work, you know, we're working for solutions. So.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
Just to the when the next meeting is, it's September 9th. That's the next scheduled meeting of the ad hoc committee. Thursday, September 9th at 4 p.m. Sorry, Supervisor, go ahead.
No problem. I just, yes, if you want to communicate, feel free to contact any of the three of us, and we'll try to move your ideas and concerns along. So thank everybody for joining us for this meeting, and special thanks to Josh. Josh is making some transitions in his life. He's moving back to Northern California from Santa Cruz, and it's a pretty exciting time for him. So we know that he's kind of keeping the stress level down. I've known Josh a long time. He's a pretty calm person, so it's great because it helps when you're working in the public sector. So thank you, Josh, for all that you do.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone. Well, we'll see you next month for sure.
Okay.
All right. Take care.